My mother-in-law made chocolate chip pancakes for all her grandchildren that morning, golden, fluffy, studded with chocolate chips, and topped with mountains of whipped cream and fresh strawberries. She made them with love and care, and that special grandmother energy that's supposed to make kids feel like the most important people in the world. She made them for everyone, except my daughter. My 7-year-old Blythe sat at that kitchen table in her favorite sunflower dress, the one she'd picked out specifically because she wanted to look pretty for Grandma. She watched her 3 cousins dig into those perfect pancakes while my mother-in-law, Darlene, set a single piece of plain white toast in front of her. No butter, no jam, just dry, sad bread on a plate that didn't even match the others. When Blythe asked if she could have pancakes too, my mother-in-law smiled and said, "Oh, honey, you don't need all that sugar. Your mother lets you eat too many sweets as it is." I stood in that doorway and watched my little girl's face crumble. I watched her pick up that piece of toast and take a tiny bite without complaint, because that's who she is. She's a people pleaser. She doesn't want to cause problems. She's spent her whole 7 years on this earth trying to earn love that should have been given to her freely. I looked at my husband, Wade, hoping he would say something. He was pouring himself coffee like nothing had happened. I looked at my father-in-law, Holt, who suddenly found his newspaper absolutely fascinating. I looked at my brother-in-law, Trent, and his wife, and they wouldn't meet my eyes. Nobody said a word. I didn't scream. I didn't flip the table. I didn't give my mother-in-law the satisfaction of calling me dramatic or unstable or any of the other words she'd used to describe me over the years when I'd tried to address how she treated my daughter. Instead, I walked calmly to the table, took my daughter's hand, and said, "We're going upstairs to pack." Darlene laughed at me. Actually laughed. "Oh, Corinne, don't be so dramatic. It's just breakfast." Just breakfast. As if 7 years of being treated like a second-class grandchild could be summed up as just breakfast. As if the 32 framed photos of Trent's kids on her wall compared to 3 of Blythe was just decorating. As if the Disney World trips my daughter wasn't invited to were just scheduling conflicts. As if throwing away the handmade card Blythe had spent 2 weeks creating, the one I'd found in the recycling bin under coffee grounds the night before, was just an accident. I packed our bags in 15 minutes. My husband followed us to the car in silence. For the first hour of the drive home, neither of us spoke. Blythe fell asleep in the back seat, exhausted from crying, her little hand still clutching the stuffed horse she'd brought to show her grandmother. When we got home, I made a decision. For 7 years, I had protected Darlene Bellamy's reputation. I had stayed quiet at family gatherings. I had smiled through holidays. I had made excuses for her behavior to my own parents, who couldn't understand why their granddaughter came home from visits to the Bellamy house looking defeated. I was done protecting her. See, here's what you need to know about my mother-in-law. Darlene Bellamy isn't just any grandmother. She's an elder at Harvest Fellowship Church. She leads the women's ministry. She organizes charity drives and family values seminars. She posts on the church Facebook group 3 times a week about the importance of loving your grandchildren equally, about how favoritism is a poison that destroys families, about how every child is a blessing from God. She was scheduled to speak at the women's brunch the very next morning about the sacred duty of grandparents. So that afternoon, while my daughter napped and my husband sat in stunned silence in the living room, I wrote a message to the Harvest Fellowship Women's Ministry group. I told them exactly what family looked like in Darlene Bellamy's home when the church wasn't watching. I included dates. I included specific incidents. I included photos of that wall of grandchildren where my daughter barely existed. I included a screenshot of the card Blythe had made, the one Darlene had thrown away without reading. I pressed send. Within 4 hours, 34 families from that church had contacted Darlene. By Saturday evening, Pastor Jean Osborne was standing on her front porch, asking questions she couldn't answer. By Sunday morning, she had been removed from the women's ministry, her speaking slot had been canceled, and the reputation she had spent 20 years building had crumbled around her. My name is Corinne Bellamy. I'm a pediatric nurse, a wife of 9 years, and the mother of the most wonderful little girl in the world. This is the story of how a single piece of toast exposed 2 decades of lies, destroyed my husband's family, and finally taught me that protecting your child is more important than keeping the peace. This is what happened when I stopped being the bigger person and started being the mother my daughter needed. To understand what happened that weekend, you need to understand what the 7 years before it looked like. I met Wade Bellamy when I was 24 years old. He was charming, kind, and came from what he described as a close-knit family. His mother called him every Sunday. His father sent him articles about fishing and local sports teams. His older brother Trent was his best friend. I thought I was marrying into something beautiful. The first warning sign came at our wedding. Darlene spent 45 minutes during the reception, talking to guests about Trent's wedding 3 years earlier, how beautiful it had been, how perfect his wife Glenna looked, how the flowers had been arranged just right. She mentioned my wedding twice, both times to note things she would have done differently. I told myself she was just nervous, mother of the groom jitters. It meant nothing. When I got pregnant with Blythe, I called Darlene to share the news. She said congratulations, then immediately asked if we were hoping for a boy. When I said we'd be happy either way, she laughed and said, "Well, Trent and Glenna are trying again too. Maybe we'll get lucky with a grandson this time." Blythe was born on a Tuesday in April, 7 pounds and 4 ounces of absolute perfection. Darlene visited the hospital 2 days later. She held my daughter for approximately 90 seconds, handed her back, and spent the rest of the visit showing me photos of Trent's kids on her phone. Over the years, I collected these moments like stones in my pocket, each one small enough to dismiss on its own, but together they weighed more than I could carry. There were the Christmas gifts. Trent's kids received brand new bicycles, gaming consoles, elaborate dollhouses. Blythe received clearance rack puzzles with pieces missing, books that were clearly purchased from garage sales, clothes 2 sizes too small that Darlene insisted she would grow into. There were the photos. I counted them once during a visit when everyone else was outside. 32 framed photographs of Trent's 3 children covered Darlene's hallway and living room walls. Some were professional portraits, some were candid shots from holidays and vacations. There were exactly 3 photos of Blythe, all taken the same afternoon during a single visit 5 years ago, all in cheap plastic frames tucked into a corner where guests wouldn't notice them. There were the trips. Darlene and Holt took Trent's kids to Disney World twice, to the Grand Canyon once, to a beach house in Florida every summer. Blythe was never invited. When I asked about it, Darlene said they simply couldn't afford to bring everyone. Meanwhile, she posted photos on Facebook of herself and all my beautiful grandchildren splashing in the ocean. But Wade always had an explanation. His mother was old-fashioned. She didn't mean anything by it. She was just closer to Trent's kids because they lived nearby. If I would just give her time, she would come around. I gave her 7 years. She never came around. The weekend trip that changed everything was supposed to be different. Darlene had called it a grandparents' weekend, a special 2-day event where all 4 grandchildren would stay at the farmhouse together. She had been promoting it for weeks, telling everyone at church about her plans, posting about it on social media. "See," Wade said when he told me about it, "she's trying. She wants Blythe to be included." I wanted to believe him. God help me, I really did. I wanted my daughter to have the grandmother experience I had cherished growing up. My own grandmother had been my favorite person in the world. She made me feel special, seen, loved, without conditions. I wanted Blythe to know that feeling, so I agreed to go. The night before we left, Blythe was more excited than I had ever seen her. She packed her little suitcase 3 different times, agonizing over which stuffed animals to bring, which books Grandma might want to read with her. She picked out her sunflower dress because yellow was her favorite color and she thought it made her look happy. Then she showed me the card she had made. She had been working on it for 2 weeks in secret. It was covered in glitter glue and stickers, with a drawing of herself and Grandma Darlene baking cookies together on the front. Inside, in her careful 2nd grade handwriting, she had written, "Dear Grandma, I love you so much. I can't wait for grandparents' weekend. Maybe we can bake cookies like you do with my cousins. Love, Blythe." She had never actually baked with her grandmother. She had only seen the photos Darlene posted of herself baking with Trent's kids. But Blythe had built an entire fantasy around it, a hope, a dream that this weekend might finally be the one where Grandma loved her back. I looked at that card and felt something twist in my chest. I hugged my daughter and told her Grandma was going to love it. We loaded the car the next morning and drove 3 hours to a farmhouse in rural Ohio, where my daughter's heart was about to be broken in ways I never should have allowed. I should have known better. I should have protected her. Instead, I drove her straight into the lion's den with a handmade card and a sunflower dress and hope that had no business existing. That mistake will haunt me for the rest of my life. We arrived at the farmhouse Friday evening, just as the sun was setting. Trent and Glenna were already there with their 3 kids, and the moment we pulled into the driveway, I could see the difference in how we were received. Darlene burst out of the front door like someone had announced a celebrity arrival. She ran to Trent's minivan with her arms wide open, scooping up each of her 3 grandchildren in long, theatrical hugs. She exclaimed over how tall they had gotten, how beautiful they looked, how much she had missed them even though they lived 20 minutes away and she saw them every other week. Then she turned to us. The warmth drained from her face like someone had flipped a switch. She gave Wade a brief hug, nodded at me with a tight smile, and looked down at Blythe with an expression I can only describe as tolerant. "Hello, Blythe," she said. No hug. No exclamation about how much she had grown, just 2 words delivered with the enthusiasm of someone greeting a distant acquaintance. But my daughter didn't notice. Or maybe she did, and chose to ignore it because the alternative was too painful. Blythe ran up to her grandmother with the handmade card clutched in both hands, her face shining with hope. "Grandma, I made this for you. I worked really hard on it." Darlene took the card, glanced at the glittery cover without opening it, and said, "How nice." Then she set it on the kitchen counter and turned her attention back to Trent's kids, asking them what they wanted for dinner. Blythe stood there for a moment, waiting for her grandmother to read the card, to see the drawing of the 2 of them baking cookies, to notice the careful handwriting inside. But Darlene had already moved on, and Blythe's small shoulders sagged as she realized the moment she had been dreaming about for 2 weeks was already over. I squeezed her hand and told her Grandma would read it later. I told myself the same thing. That night, after the kids were in bed and the adults were having coffee in the living room, I excused myself to use the bathroom. On my way back, I passed through the kitchen and saw something that stopped me cold. The card was in the recycling bin. Blythe's handmade card, covered in glitter glue and filled with love and hope, had been thrown away like junk mail. It was buried under coffee grounds and crumpled napkins, the glitter catching the light like a cruel joke. I stood there staring at it for what felt like hours. My hands shook as I reached in and pulled it out, brushing off the coffee grounds, trying to smooth the wrinkles. The glue had smeared and some of the stickers had peeled off, but I could still see my daughter's careful drawing. 2 figures holding hands, one big, one small. Grandma and me, written underneath in purple crayon. I didn't say anything. I couldn't trust myself to speak without screaming. I tucked the card into my suitcase and returned to the living room, where Darlene was telling everyone about her plans for the big pancake breakfast the next morning. "I'm making my famous chocolate chip pancakes," she announced. "The kids absolutely love them. I've been perfecting the recipe for years." I sat there listening to her talk about this special breakfast while the ghost of my daughter's discarded card burned a hole in my mind. I told myself to wait, to give her one more chance. Maybe the card had fallen into the recycling by accident. Maybe tomorrow would be different. Tomorrow was not different. I woke Saturday morning to the smell of pancakes and the sound of children laughing. For one foolish moment, I felt hopeful. I helped Blythe get ready, braiding her hair the way she liked, smoothing down her sunflower dress. She was practically vibrating with excitement. We walked into the kitchen and I saw the scene that would shatter my daughter's heart. Darlene stood at the griddle in a floral apron, flipping golden pancakes studded with chocolate chips. The kitchen looked like something from a magazine spread. Trent's 3 kids sat at the table with plates piled high, each pancake tower topped with whipped cream, fresh strawberries arranged in smiley faces, and syrup pooling in amber puddles. Holt was pouring fresh squeezed orange juice into their glasses, and everyone was laughing about something one of the kids had said. Blythe's face lit up like Christmas morning. She climbed into the empty chair, next to her cousins, and waited, her hands folded in her lap, practically bouncing with anticipation. Darlene walked over to the table, but instead of a plate of beautiful pancakes, she set down a single piece of plain white toast. No butter, no jam, just dry bread on a chipped plate that didn't match anything else on the table. "There you go, sweetheart," Darlene said with a smile that made my skin crawl. I watched my daughter's face cycle through confusion, hurt, and finally a heartbreaking attempt at acceptance. She looked at her toast, then at her cousin's elaborate pancake towers, then back at her grandmother. "Can I have pancakes too, Grandma?" Her voice was so small, so hopeful, so desperate to believe there had been some mistake. Darlene patted her head like she was a dog who had asked for table scraps. "Oh, honey, you don't need all that sugar. Your mother lets you eat too many sweets as it is. Toast is much better for you." Then she turned back to the griddle and began making another batch of chocolate chip pancakes. For seconds. For Trent's kids, who were already stuffed but wanted more. Blythe picked up her dry toast and took a bite. She didn't complain. She didn't cry, at least not yet. She just chewed that tasteless bread while her cousins devoured chocolate and whipped cream 3 feet away from her, and something inside me cracked wide open. I walked toward Darlene, keeping my voice low so the children wouldn't hear. I was still trying to be reasonable, still trying to handle this like an adult, still making the same mistake I had made for 7 years. "Darlene, Blythe would really love some pancakes. She doesn't have any dietary restrictions." My mother-in-law turned to face me with that smile she had perfected over decades, the one that looked warm to outsiders but felt like ice to anyone who knew her. She spoke quietly, but not quietly enough. "Corinne, I've raised 3 children. I know what's best for growing bodies. Blythe is a little heavier than the other kids, and I'm just looking out for her. You should be thanking me." The words hit me like a punch to the stomach. My daughter was not overweight. She was a perfectly healthy, normal 7-year-old. But even if she had been, the cruelty of what Darlene had just said was unforgivable. She had singled out my child, humiliated her in front of her cousins, and was now suggesting I should be grateful for it. I looked at Blythe. She had stopped eating. Her toast sat abandoned on the plate, and she was staring at her lap with her little hands folded together. She had heard every word. Of course she had. Children always hear the things we wish they wouldn't. I turned to Wade, who was leaning against the counter with his coffee. "Did you hear what your mother just said?" He shifted his weight from one foot to the other, his eyes darting between me and Darlene. "She didn't mean anything by it, Corinne. She's just old-fashioned about nutrition. Let's not make a scene. Let's not make a scene." Those 5 words contained the entire history of my marriage. Every time Darlene had slighted our daughter, every time she had excluded Blythe, every time she had made it clear that our child was less than, Wade had asked me not to make a scene. He had chosen his mother's comfort over his daughter's well-being so many times that he didn't even realize he was doing it anymore. But I was done. I was done being polite. I was done waiting for things to get better. I was done sacrificing my daughter on the altar of family peace. I walked to the table, took Blythe's hand, and pulled her gently from her chair. "We're going upstairs to pack." Darlene actually laughed. "Oh, Corinne, don't be so dramatic. It's just breakfast." I didn't respond. I led my daughter upstairs to the guest room and closed the door behind us. Then I knelt down so I could look into her eyes. "Baby, I need you to know something. There is nothing wrong with you. Nothing at all. You are perfect exactly as you are. You deserve chocolate chip pancakes just like everyone else. Do you understand me?" Blythe's chin trembled. The tears she had been holding back finally spilled over. "Then why doesn't Grandma like me, Mommy? What did I do wrong?" I held her while she cried, stroking her hair and telling her over and over that she had done nothing wrong, that some people have broken parts inside them that make them unable to love the way they should, that it was never, ever her fault. While I comforted my daughter, I could hear Darlene in the hallway talking on the phone. She was laughing, telling someone about the grandparents' weekend and how she couldn't wait to share photos at church tomorrow. "Pastor Jean asked me to speak about the blessing of family at the women's brunch," she said. "I'm going to talk about how grandchildren are God's reward for surviving parenthood." Something clicked into place in my mind. I thought about all the posts I had seen Darlene make on the church Facebook group, the articles she shared about loving your grandchildren unconditionally, the seminars she led on building faithful families, the image she had carefully constructed as the perfect Christian grandmother. I thought about the card in my suitcase, the one she had thrown away without reading. I thought about the 32 photos on her wall and the 3 of Blythe hidden in the corner. I thought about my daughter asking what she had done wrong, and I made a decision. For 7 years, I had protected Darlene Bellamy's reputation. I had stayed silent to keep the peace. I had let her treat my daughter like garbage while she preached about family values to everyone who would listen. I had allowed her to be 2 different people, one for the church and one for my child, and I had never once forced her to reconcile those 2 versions of herself. That ended today. I packed our bags in 15 minutes. When I came downstairs, the family had gathered in the living room. Wade tried to stop me at the bottom of the stairs. "Corinne, please, let's talk about this." "I've tried to talk about this for 7 years, Wade. You've never listened." Darlene stood up from the couch. "I have done nothing but try to include that child. You threw away her handmade card. You put it in the recycling bin last night. She spent 2 weeks making it for you." The room went silent. Even Holt looked up from his newspaper. Trent and Glenna exchanged glances but said nothing. I kept going. "You have 32 photos of Trent's kids on your wall and 3 of Blythe. You've taken them to Disney World twice and told us you couldn't afford to bring our daughter. You started college funds for each of them, and when I asked about one for Blythe 4 years ago, you said you'd think about it. You're still thinking." Darlene's face turned red. "Those are private family matters. And today you publicly humiliated my daughter in front of her cousins because you think she's too fat for pancakes. She's 7 years old, Darlene. 7. I took Blythe's hand and walked out the front door. Wade followed us to the car, and after a moment of hesitation, he got in the passenger seat. He didn't say anything for the first hour of the drive, but my mind was already working. I knew exactly what I was going to do when I got home. Darlene Bellamy wanted to stand in front of her church and talk about the blessing of grandchildren. I was going to make sure they knew exactly what kind of blessing she had been to mine. We got home around 2 in the afternoon. Blythe was exhausted from crying and fell asleep almost immediately. Wade sat in the living room staring at the wall, processing what had just happened. He didn't try to defend his mother. He didn't tell me I had overreacted. For the first time in our marriage, he seemed to actually understand what I had been telling him for 7 years. I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop and began to write. The message wasn't angry. It wasn't hysterical. I had learned long ago that emotional outbursts only gave people like Darlene ammunition to dismiss you as crazy or unstable, so I kept my tone calm and factual. I wrote like a nurse documenting a patient's condition: clinical, precise, devastating. I addressed it to the Harvest Fellowship Women's Ministry Facebook group, the same group where Darlene had posted just 3 days earlier about how grandparents have a sacred duty to love all their grandchildren equally. I started by introducing myself as the wife of Darlene Bellamy's younger son and the mother of her youngest grandchild. Then I told them everything. I told them about the Christmas gifts, the designer clothes and electronics for Trent's kids, the garage sale puzzles, and 2 small clothes for Blythe. I told them about the photos on the wall, 32 frames for 3 grandchildren, 3 frames hidden in a corner for 1. I told them about the Disney World trips and the beach vacations, and the Grand Canyon adventures that my daughter was never invited to join. I told them about the card, how Blythe had spent 2 weeks making it with glitter glue and stickers and all the love her 7-year-old heart could hold, how Darlene had glanced at it without opening it and set it aside, how I found it in the recycling bin that night, buried under coffee grounds like trash. I told them about the pancakes, how Darlene made chocolate chip pancakes with whipped cream and strawberries for 3 of her grandchildren and handed my daughter a piece of dry toast, how she told Blythe she didn't need the sugar, how she implied my daughter was fat in front of her cousins, loud enough for everyone to hear. I included photos. The wall of grandchildren with Blythe barely represented, the card I had rescued from the garbage, screenshots of Darlene's own posts about loving all grandchildren equally, about favoritism being a poison that destroys families. I ended with a simple statement. Tomorrow morning, Darlene Bellamy will stand before you and speak about the blessing of family. I wanted you to know what family looks like in her home when the church isn't watching. I read the message 3 times. Then I pressed send. For the first hour, nothing happened. I started to wonder if anyone had even seen it, or if they had seen it and simply didn't care. Maybe Darlene's reputation was too strong. Maybe they would all assume I was lying. Then my phone buzzed. The first message was from a woman named Ruth Ann, who said she had known Darlene for 15 years. She said she had always sensed something was off about how Darlene talked about her grandchildren. She noticed that Darlene never mentioned Blythe, that she changed the subject whenever anyone asked about her youngest grandchild. She apologized for never saying anything. She said she should have trusted her instincts. The second message came 10 minutes later from a mother whose son had a disability. She told me that Darlene had once suggested her boy shouldn't attend vacation Bible school because he might make the other children uncomfortable. She had never told anyone because she thought no one would believe her. The third message was from a woman who worked in the church nursery. She said Darlene had a habit of ranking the children in the congregation as good families and problem families. She said Darlene had made comments about certain kids being less worthy of attention than others. By 5 o'clock, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Messages poured in from church members, some expressing outrage on Blythe's behalf, others sharing their own experiences with Darlene's quiet cruelties. 34 families contacted me before dinner. 34 families who had seen something wrong and stayed silent, just like I had for 7 years. The calls to Darlene started shortly after. I wasn't there to see it, but Wade told me later what happened. His mother called him in a panic around 6 o'clock, demanding to know what I had done. He told her the truth. She had done this to herself. By Saturday evening, Pastor Gene Osborne had received enough calls that he drove to the farmhouse personally. He sat in Darlene's living room and asked her directly about the incidents in my message. She tried to deny everything. She said I was mentally unstable. She said I had always been jealous of her relationship with Trent's children. She said I was trying to destroy her family. Then Holt spoke. My father-in-law, the man who had spent 40 years deferring to his wife in every matter, the man who had watched his granddaughter be mistreated and never said a word, finally opened his mouth. She's telling the truth, Gene. It's all true. I've watched it happen, and I never stopped it. Pastor Gene asked Darlene to step down from the women's ministry effective immediately. He canceled her speaking slot at the Sunday brunch. He told her she needed to take time away from church leadership to reflect on her behavior and seek repentance. Darlene was stunned. For the first time in 20 years, her carefully constructed image had crumbled. The woman who had built her identity around being the perfect Christian grandmother had been exposed as something far less holy. Trent called Wade that night, furious. Your wife destroyed this family. Wade's response surprised both of us. No, Mom destroyed it. Corinne just finally told the truth. He hung up the phone and looked at me across the kitchen. His eyes were red, and I could see the weight of everything pressing down on him. His mother had been exposed. His brother blamed me. His family would never be the same. But for the first time, he was standing on my side, on our daughter's side. It had taken 7 years and a piece of dry toast, but Wade Bellamy had finally chosen his family, his real family. The weeks that followed were some of the hardest of my life, but also some of the most clarifying. The Bellamy family fractured along predictable lines. Trent and Glenna cut off all contact with us, calling me a liar and a family destroyer despite the overwhelming evidence. They told their children that Aunt Corinne was a bad person, and just like that, Blythe lost her cousins too. It broke my heart to watch her ask why she couldn't play with them anymore, but I refused to lie to her. I told her that sometimes families go through hard times and that none of it was her fault. Darlene never apologized. Not once. She retreated from church life, attending services only sporadically and sitting in the back pew instead of her usual spot near the front. She told anyone who would listen that she was the victim of a vicious smear campaign orchestrated by her jealous daughter-in-law. Some people believed her, most didn't. The women's ministry she had led for nearly 2 decades elected new leadership, and her name was quietly removed from the church newsletter. But something unexpected happened with Holt. About 2 weeks after that terrible weekend, a small package arrived in the mail addressed to Blythe. Inside was a handwritten card from her grandfather and a $20 bill. The card said simply, "I'm sorry I didn't protect you. I should have been braver. I love you, Grandpa Holt." More packages followed. A stuffed horse because he remembered she loved horses. A book about a girl who wanted to be a veterinarian. A photo of himself and Blythe from when she was a baby, one I had never seen before, with a note on the back that said, "This was the day I became a grandfather for the 4th time." I should have acted like it. Holt never confronted Darlene directly, at least not that I know of. But in his own quiet way, he was trying to make amends. He was trying to be the grandfather he should have been all along. It wasn't enough to erase 7 years of silence, but it was something. It was a start. Wade and I had difficult conversations in the weeks that followed. The kind of conversations we should have had years earlier, but kept avoiding because it was easier to pretend everything was fine. He admitted that he had always known his mother treated Blythe differently. He had seen it from the very beginning, but convinced himself it wasn't that bad. He told himself that I was being oversensitive, that his mother just needed time to warm up, that keeping the peace was more important than addressing the problem. "I chose my mother's comfort over my daughter's well-being," he said one night after Blythe was asleep. "I don't know how to forgive myself for that." I told him the truth. Forgiveness would take time, so would rebuilding trust. But I could see that he was genuinely trying to understand what he had done wrong, and that mattered. We started couples counseling, something I had suggested years ago and he had always resisted. It wasn't easy, but we were both committed to building something better for our daughter. The most important healing happened with Blythe. Children are resilient in ways that constantly amaze me, but they also carry wounds that adults often can't see. In the months after that weekend, I watched my daughter carefully for signs of lasting damage. I enrolled her in art therapy, where she could express feelings she didn't have words for yet. I made sure she knew every single day that she was loved, that she was worthy, that she deserved good things. One Sunday morning, about a month after everything happened, Blythe and I made chocolate chip pancakes together. Wade joined us, getting flour all over his shirt and making Blythe giggle when he tried to flip a pancake and sent it flying onto the ceiling. We sat at our own kitchen table, in our own home, eating pancakes piled high with whipped cream and strawberries and absolutely zero guilt. Blythe looked up at me with chocolate smeared on her chin and said, "Mommy, these are way better than Grandma's." I smiled and kissed the top of her head. "That's because they were made with love, baby. That's the secret ingredient." She nodded like this made perfect sense and went back to drowning her pancakes in syrup. I watched her eat without shame, without apology, without wondering if she deserved it. And I made a promise to myself that I would never again let anyone make my daughter feel like she was less than. Not family, not friends, not anyone. Looking back, my only regret is that I waited so long. I spent 7 years being the bigger person, keeping the peace, making excuses for inexcusable behavior. I told myself that Blythe was too young to notice, that things would get better with time, that I could protect her without causing conflict. I was wrong about all of it. My daughter noticed everything. Things didn't get better. And by staying silent, I wasn't protecting her. I was teaching her that she didn't deserve to be protected. If you're watching this and you're in a situation where someone is hurting your child, even with small cruelties, even with quiet exclusions, even with favoritism disguised as concern, please hear me. Don't wait. Don't convince yourself it's not that bad. Don't sacrifice your child's heart to keep the peace with people who don't deserve your loyalty. Protect your child. Every single time. Even when it's hard, even when it costs you relationships, even when it makes you the villain in someone else's story. Your child's heart is more important than anyone's comfort, including your own. My name is Corinne Bellamy. My daughter's name is Blythe. And this is the story of how a piece of toast and 34 phone calls taught me that sometimes the bravest thing a mother can do is stop being polite and start being fierce. Thank you for listening. If this story moved you, please take a moment to hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment below and tell me your thoughts. Have you ever dealt with favoritism in your family? How did you handle it? I read every single comment, and your stories matter to me. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to this channel and click the notification bell so you never miss another story. We post new videos every week, and I promise each one will make you feel something real. Thank you for being here. Thank you for caring. And thank you for being the kind of person who stands up for what's right. I'll see you in the next one.